The course of events begins in Seoul. Now we are watching how the future of the entire city is in the hands of one person. This guy's name is Chang Shi-hwan. He is the head of the Junhwan Guild. Judging by his condition, it is not easy for him now, because right now there is a fight. Next, we watch how the guy with whom Chang Shi-hwan fought stands against the backdrop of destroyed Seoul and innocent victims everywhere. The surviving people who gathered in a crowd and watched the battle could not believe that the head of the guild, Junghwan, was definitely experiencing problems. The hooded man's name is Shin Kang-hoo. At the moment, he is the enemy of all humanity. Now he is glad that only the two of them are left on the battlefield. However, the hero of humanity fell to his knees and trembled. He had no strength left to continue the battle for all of Seoul. But gathering all his strength, he rises from his knees and tells the enemy of humanity that because of the useless massacre that he carried out, everyone around him is suffering. The defender of humanity, collecting impulses of his last power, blames this guy in the hood for everything that happened, calling him the devil. But in response to this accusation, the so-called devil only grins and, getting into a fighting stance, interrupts the mewing session and says that this is very funny. Suddenly, this guy asks the defense attorney who he thinks he is. Does he really consider himself a messenger of justice? These words do not pass him by. A few moments later, these words awaken anger in the head of the guild, and he, preparing his blow, informs the scoundrel that he has no right to talk about justice. The guild leader furiously screams that right now he is fighting on behalf of everyone, and he always gets in his way and stops him from threatening people who just want to play Fortnite. So the only thing he can call him is the devil, and this is perfect because there is no other name for the enemy of humanity. Hearing this heroic speech, the crowd became enthusiastic. All the people in the crowd raised their fists and fiercely called out the name Chang Shi-hwan to encourage their champion. For the defender of humanity himself, judging by his face, which has become much more confident, this support from the people clearly carries weight. Summoning a red-colored magic seal, he prepares his next major move. This battle is surely close to ending. Having prepared his attack and directed it at the scoundrel, the head of the guild says that as long as the people support him, he will never lose to such a loser like him. Next, we watch as a huge red magic projectile is directed straight at this bastard, with very little left before the collision. A few moments later, this devil realizes that he reacted too late and now he can't escape this blow. The magic projectile mercilessly collides with the face of this devil and explodes, forming a huge smoke curtain like in CS:GO 2. After the defender of humanity saw how the smoke curtain from his projectile had dissipated, he approached this guy who was on his knees. Shin Kang-hoo is seriously injured. This can be seen from his wounded face. He cannot even get up from his knees. Then he looks somewhere to the side. The target of his gaze was the inspired people who joyfully shout that they always believed in Chang Shi-hwan. They all shout for the hero of humanity to deal with him. The next step is to point their fists at the bastard who is exhausted and shout with one voice to finish off this bastard. At this time, Sigma, the defender of humanity, looks down at the guy in the hood and tells him that no one wants to leave him alive. The next step, the head of the guild summons another purple magical seal just like Satoru Gojo, and he is clearly going to point it at the scoundrel. Looking at the wounded bastard and pointing his second magic missile at him, he informs him that now the end of his life will come. A moment later, a magical shot reaches the enemy of humanity with incredible speed, leaving him without a hand. It goes away so easily, as if he were a Lego figure. After this incredible shot, not only is the bastard left without an arm, but he also goes flying, breaking through the asphalt with his body. Shin Kang-hoo's eyes darken and his eyes close. He sees in front of him a blurry picture of the head of the guild approaching his body, and he is in no hurry to do so. The next step, instead of approaching the scoundrel, the hero soars into the air at a very fast speed, lifting off the ground. Once in flight, he spreads his hands to the side and breaks into a smile and informs all the people that all their preparations have finally borne fruit. Using some strange magical technique and directing it into the sky, he says that from now on, absolute freedom will descend on these lands. Everyone around is very happy and tears of joy roll into their eyes. I bet they don't even know what their hero is doing now. The hero of humanity continues to recite the spell in a different dialect and directs his spell further and further into the heavens. After the guild leader concentrates a sufficient amount of mana, his spell shoots into the sky, forming a huge red thundercloud there. Then a black hand of colossal size emerges from this terribly gloomy cloud and continues its movement towards the head of the guild. At that very moment, people's emotions instantly change. Instead of the joy that was on their faces just recently, bewilderment and fear appear. However, at this time, the guy with white hair continues to look at what is happening in the sky with the crazy look of an anime psychopath. Immediately after this, a huge demonic hand crawls out of the sky and reaches for this pathetic fake savior of humanity. While all the people around are running away in panic as far as possible from what is happening, this psychopath looks at the chaos that is happening in the skies and rejoices at the king of demons. At the same time, the guy who was called the enemy of humanity, defeated, looked at the tyranny that was happening and realized how stupid the people were. A couple of moments later, Changshu notices his opponent on the ground and is surprised that he is still alive, calling him a fucking insect and asking him to keep an eye on what is happening. This guy, who until recently was called the defender of all humanity, has gone completely mad. He is shouting for everyone to look at the real world he created. Then a huge explosion occurs, just like in the Big Bang Theory, which is exactly how this world was destroyed by this madman. Then something unexpected happens in front of us. A text appears with gratitude for the support that was shown to the manhwa, called The Life of a Villain Who Became a Savior. The next shot is of the author of this very strange manhwa, who is probably surfing the internet at this moment. Reading reviews of his recently released manhwa, he realizes that his readers' expectations were completely shattered by what we saw so recently. After all, according to the plot, the main character Chang Shi-huan turned out to be a servant of the King of Demons himself, and with his comrades, the 13 Stars. At the end of the manhwa, they all turned out to be evil of the highest level. They did not understand that fiction is just a mirror reflecting reality. Next, the author of this short story states that it was written based on his student life. We watch as a guy puts a flower on the grave. After all, it was during his student years that he was able to see the power that can hide even school violence. At the same moment in his life, he saw the true face of the world, a force that is capable of changing places of good and evil without much difficulty. It was for these reasons that our real protagonist included this factor of his reality in this short story. But he faced a crash similar to that of the iPhone 12 mini. The next frame we see in front of us is a rating of only 2 stars and negative reviews. Everyone speaks very negatively about the ending, which is worse than in Berserk. Continuing to read comments from readers that he should stop writing novels and go to Fortnite, the guy realizes that nothing can be done about it. After realizing that he is unable to do anything about the failure of his novel, he furiously closes the browser with negative reviews. The guy gets up from his workplace and heads to his bed. The room is the same mess as any MOBA game player who lives with his parents. Even though he has stepped away from the computer, negative comments from readers who do not understand such an open ending do not leave his thoughts. At this time, the guy who wrote this novel lies on the bed trying to sleep. But it's not so easy when you've angered an entire fandom of readers. He cannot get rid of the comments he has read that burst into his consciousness. They continue to furiously hate the author of this short story. These thoughts bring our main character. He understands that now he cannot avoid the readers' accusations that he destroyed their little world. Lying on his not-so-comfortable bed, he realizes that even now he won't be able to rewrite anything to improve, so he decides to just go to bed. Our main character closes his eyes and falls asleep suspiciously quickly, but after a couple of moments he slowly opens his eyes due to a strange noise around him. Fully opening his eyes because of the noise, he sees in front of him a strange picture in which workers are mining ores with their pickaxes, like in Minecraft. Looking around, the guy sees his body. He realizes that he is also in work uniform, and now he is not in his bed but on the cold and dirty stone floor. A couple of moments later, the scream of a man is heard calling one of the workers dog shit while kicking him. The man who beat the guy, how dare he shirk despite the mercy of the eclipse? Our main character is surprised after he hears the words about the eclipse. Taking a closer look at this picture, our main character realizes that he is again haunted by the image of that guy with blonde hair, based on whom he created one of the main characters. Realizing this, the author of the short story gets very angry because he understands that now he will also dream about this idiot, bothering him even in his sleep. Meanwhile, the beating of this guy with blonde hair by the caretaker continues. He advises him to get to work, otherwise he will turn into a chop. But the next moment, the caretaker in the cap stops abruptly before delivering another blow to the poor fellow. After this, everyone around, including the caretaker who had just interrupted his beating, looks puzzled at our main character who has just awakened. Next, we begin to watch the same already slightly boring beating, but this time the target of the blows is not the guy with blonde hair, but our main character. While another warden pulls his colleague away, our main character, in bewilderment, does not understand why he is in pain if this is just a dream. Due to the strong blows that the newly awakened guy receives, he loses the gift of hearing and cannot hear what these two are talking about, even when he is very close to them. This enormous pain and injury makes him seriously wonder if this is all really a dream, because it all seems incredibly real. Hearing and vision return to their owner, and we see in front of us a Roblox donator who threatens our main character that next time he will become a chop. A moment later, we see in front of us a poor guy with blonde hair who runs up to us, addressing our main character as Kang Hu, asking if everything is okay. Everything that happened earlier fades into the background. Hearing the address of the bright guy, he looks at his hands and begins to realize why he was named Kang Hu. However, he is not going to put up with what came into his head, which is why he immediately gets up from the ground and quickly heads somewhere. But his route does not last long. After walking several dozen steps, he falls to the ground and puts both his hands on it. Unfortunately, his fears turn out to be real because immediately after trying to use mana, his hands begin to glow with blue fire. After a couple of moments, the mana becomes more and more. It is so new that it surrounds everything around without much difficulty. Raising his hands, our main character understands that what just happened is the ability to absorb huge amounts of mana at will. Approaching the nearest body of water, he realizes that this is definitely an innate hypersensitivity to mana. He begins to realize everything. Using the critical thinking of Sherlock Holmes, he realizes that all this means only one thing. He was reborn in the body of Shin Kang Hu. Such an unexpected turn of events forces our main character to grab his head and realize that of all the people he got, it was Shin Kang Hu. Then the guy looks around and sees a blonde man in front of him who is trying to apologize for what he got because of him. The guy understands that if this blonde is still alive, then there are still 5 years left until the end of this world. If he were lucky enough to become Zhang Shihuan, then everything would have been much easier, because in this case, absolutely all people would have revered him as their hero of the world. But everything turned out to be much more complicated. If everything continues at the same pace, then everything will begin to happen the same way as we saw at the beginning of this manhwa. That is, everything will end with the arrival of the Demon King because of this blonde who turns out to be his servant, and the murder of everyone except his minions. Shin Kang Hu, or our main character in his body, understands that if he does not change the ending on his own, he will die a miserable death along with this world. But in this chaos and rain of bad news, the guy understands that there is good news. It lies in the fact that he knows how to escape from here and return to the League of Legends. Our main character continues to analyze what happened to him. He understands that according to his guesses, Shin Kang Hu's past and experience now belong to him. After this, the guy opens the skills window. His level is 10th, there are no constellations, the killer class, and his only skills are teleportation and short distance jumping. Continuing to work hard in the mine, the guy realizes that his avatar's stamina is completely crap. He understands that he shouldn't have given him weakness just because he's a villain. Meanwhile, our main character continues to draw something on the ground. Holding some kind of magical ore in his hands, he understands that this is the only way. Meanwhile, a guy with blonde hair runs up to our main character from behind, asking him if he's okay. Our main character tells this poor guy that everything is fine with him and he shouldn't worry about him. The guy, in response to this, suggests asking the guards for a break. Having heard what the blonde is going to ask, the guy says that if these scum gave breaks to people depending on their condition, they would never in their lives find themselves in such a place and with such terrifying working conditions. Then we observe the emblem of this organization. This detention center in which our main character is located was created by a criminal organization called Eclipse. This criminal organization makes a living by finding slaves for novice hunters who are able to use mana. Having assembled troops of such novice hunters, they force them to work as slaves to extract mana stones, which is probably the currency of this world. Next, these poor newbie hunters who find themselves here are forced to work tirelessly to the point of terrible exhaustion in order to farm magic mana crystals. Returning back to our main character, and we watch as he turns to the blonde, saying that he really shouldn't worry and go back to mining stones. This blonde turns out to be not as stupid as he seems at first glance. He asks Kang Hu if he wants to escape from this place. But our main character briefly tells this guy to forget about it and get back to work before the guards hit him in the neck a second time. The guy adds, telling the blonde not to do anything reckless and attract attention to himself. The blonde awkwardly scratches his head and agrees. Next, we watch as Zhang Shihuan returns to work, leaving our main character. He did everything to warn him. He once again remembers that Zhang Shihuan was created based on a real guy who appeared in his student life. Meanwhile, our main character continues to work hard in the mine. He understands that he is not yet able to change the course of his story. That is why he continues to work, but not just like that, because he is slowly hatching his grandiose plan to escape from this place. Meanwhile, work in this mine does not stop for a single moment. All new hunters continue to mine mana stones tirelessly. Returning to our main character, we watch as he dug up a whole cart filled with magical mana stones. He is carrying it somewhere. However, a strange noise he encounters makes him stop and look questioningly at the source of the noise. Looking at the event that causes the noise, he sees how the blonde once again finds himself in an unpleasant situation. He is again beaten by the guard. But this time, this guy won't get away with simple beatings, because this time he is accused of thinking of running away when the guard's attention was on the newcomers. Next, the guard reached for his blade, slowly pulling it out of his sheath. Looking at this, the blonde began to shake in fear for his life. After this muscular guard took out his blade, he began to swing at the guy with blonde hair, saying that right now he would answer for his actions. This time there was no one to stop the guard. After he swung, he delivered a piercing blow that pierced the guy's chest, causing him enormous lethal damage. All the workers, along with our main character, watching the execution of a guy with blonde hair, opened their eyes and mouths wide. No one expected this. After the sword returned to its owner, causing even more damage to the guy, he, in turn, fell to the ground, making a characteristic sound. There was so much blood from this merciless murder, just like Doom Eternal, that it stained everyone who stood nearby. Let our main character try to seem like a gigantic child and not show that he was frightened by such a bloodthirsty spectacle. It was clear that he was trembling. After life completely left the blonde's body, he stopped moving completely. Having lost too much of his body, he became an element of the decor of this cave. When this cruel scene ended, our main character stood in front of the corpse and thought about what an idiot this guy was, because he warned him not to do anything stupid. But our main character at this moment was able to regain his calm. He silently looked at the corpse of the guy who had just recently spoken to him. Next, the guard turned to our main character and asked him if he would go on a rampage like last time, because now there is no one who would stop him from killing him. However, the guy, in response to this, turned on the solo GigaChad mode and said that he didn't care at all about the fact that he died. Our main character's plan worked because his words were convincing enough for the guard to be surprised by this remark. The guy continued by saying that now it would be much more important for him to go to the toilet to relieve himself. The guard was twice surprised. Awesome, but the guard continued to feel like a daddy and asked the pathetic scum in front of him if he really did something in his pants after what he saw. However, after this scene, it was easy for the guard to believe this, which is why next we watch as the guard turned and ordered the guy to follow him. Judging by the look of our main character, everything went according to his plan, but it was hard to believe, so we continue. After some time of tedious walking, we watch as the guard, standing near the toilet, informs the slave that he has a minute to do his own business. The security guard, who continued to feel like the boss of this manhwa, added that if the guy lingers for even a second, the toilet will become his grave. After our main character entered the toilet, a terrible sight opened up to us because apparently many slaves used the toilet to ride on a rope like on a swing. Passing by these not very smart guys who really thought that their necks would withstand a session of fun with the help of a rope, the guy realized that he was looking for something nearby. He continued to head further and further through the toilet, realizing that he was close to finding the thing he needed. Meanwhile, the guard, or the warden, was standing near the entrance to the toilet with his arms folded. He was actually counting down the minute of our main character in the toilet. After the guy reached the place he needed, he looked at the booth and realized that this place was definitely what he needed. A couple of moments later, we watch as our main character injured himself using the methods he found. Perhaps he wanted to turn into a titan. Alas, no. The guy received a slight injury, fell to the floor and began to draw something like a pentagram on the floor of the toilet with his blood. Meanwhile, the irritated guard who continued to count informed us that our main character had only 39 seconds left to visit the toilet. But during this time, our main character had already managed to draw a pentagram on the floor, which was drawn in his own blood. At that moment, he had 13 seconds left. Despite the fact that our main character has very little time left, the pentagram on the floor is already ready. It begins to glow blue. Our main character continues to perform this strange ritual. Suddenly, he turns to someone and says that he knows that the observer is experiencing pleasure. Our main character's monologue is interrupted by the authoritative voice of a security guard, who tells him that he has 10 seconds left and needs to finish. However, our main character turns back to his seal and asks if what he summoned is interesting, how he managed to summon it as a noob. The guy understood that if he followed the canon of the novella he had written and stayed here for a while longer, he would appear here later. Falling to the floor, he understands that if he had delayed even one more day, then the hope that the outside world had been waiting for would have become unattainable. The guy understood that these were the words that would be told to him in order to convince him in response to his call, since he had become the entertainment that something was waiting for him. The main character continues to turn to the seal, saying that the only one who can use its abilities 100% is himself. After a couple of moments, we understand that his words achieved success because something he called upon began to manifest itself. The guy was not surprised. We understand that this guy just summoned the main constellation that made a contract with Shin Kang-ho in the original story of the novel. Continuing to observe the constellation that will make him a super strong Giga Child, the guy addresses him as a dimensional robber. After this constellation appeared, it called the guy an arrogant bastard, but it would allow him to use his power for a short time once he managed to attract attention. After a couple of moments, the rather standing guy begins to accept the power that begins to envelop him. The constellation gives the guy a chance to prove himself. Immediately after the process of acquiring power, a system notification appears in front of our main character, notifying him that he has received the constellation. A moment later, we hear a loud sound. The guard who brought Shin Kang-ho to the toilet furiously opens the door, asking who he thinks he is. But after the guard comes in, he sees absolutely nothing similar to the picture in the school supply store during the summer holidays. The guard did not see anything because of the cloud of smoke that formed due to the increase in the level of our main character, but it begins to develop quickly. Meanwhile, another notification pops up in front of our main character, which notifies him about the purchase of a Fortnite Battle Pass and promotion. All skills to the maximum. 2 unremarkable skills of our protagonist, such as jumping over short distances and teleportation, are improved to the maximum from this moment. Thanks to his teleportation skill, which moved to the last level, the guy instantly takes off running into the stunned guard. However, after our main character closes the distance to the guard sufficiently, he disappears using his teleportation ability. The security guard, who spent all his screen time trying to seem cool in bewilderment, not understanding what was happening, turns back, puzzled. But this doesn't help, because after he instantly turns back in search of our main character, no one is there. Even the corpses have disappeared somewhere. Meanwhile, our main character, who has entered maximum level berserker mode, finds himself right behind this loser, preparing a blow. Finding himself behind this guard, the guy with the assassin class does not waste a second, and in the next moment, lunges with some sharp thing. After the guy perfectly uses all the potential he received in an instant, he delivers a crushing blow to the man in the back. But it doesn't end there. When he puts this strange blade to the guard's throat, he stops. The guard realizes that he is in complete shit. Surely this guy in the cap was ready to shit his pants. He begins to tremble and tries to ask the guy how he was able to pull all this off. But our main character is not going to answer the question of this simple first-level loser, so he ends his life without further ado. Next, we watch as the evil guard who beat our main character immediately after his appearance in this world falls like a sack of potatoes. The killer with maximum skill tightly grasps the bloody shiv in his hands and thanks the guard for his stupidity. This guy maintains a frightening indifference. As if he killed guards every day as a slave, thanks to this loser, he will leave this place today. After this simple murder, our main character is approached by the constellation that endowed him with powers. It recognizes him as interesting and concludes a contract. Our main character does not pay attention to the constellation's appeals to him. Because he planned all this, he only thinks that he was able to avenge the blonde. Next, we watch as the guy takes a blade from the floor that previously belonged to a dead guard and inserts it into its sheath. After this simple action, a notification pops up in front of us again, notifying us that we have just received a weapon. It was at this moment that we witnessed how our main character began his great journey. Confidently standing over the defeated enemy, he promises himself not to look back. The course of events is interrupted and the passage of time accelerates because our main character remains to think through the details of his escape from this terrible place. Returning to the room in which our main character is located, we observe a canister of gasoline whose contents pour out of it onto the floor. Our main character turns out to be not the most patient, which is why he takes it in his hands and tries to speed up the process of pouring a flammable substance on the floor. A couple of moments later, we see our main character again, who takes his first step towards escape, which is to obtain the form of a second-rank warden. Next, our main character takes out a fashionable lighter ordered from China, which was clearly in the uniform of a security guard, and activates it not at all in order to relax. He needs this lighter and fire, because the second step of his release is to set it on fire, because he just poured out a flammable substance. Next, we watch the lighter fall in slow motion, which falls straight into the hot liquid. Now it's obviously going to be hot. After the fire reacts with the liquid and ignites, our main character, like any other tough guy, leaves despite the explosion. While all the guards watching the huge fire are panicking, our main character illuminates for us his third step to escape, to leave through the main gate. The guards are at a loss. They could not even imagine that this could happen. He is in a panic trying to call the fire department as soon as possible. We understand that because of the ingenious plan of our main character, which works perfectly, there is a boil around and everyone is distracted by the fire. Most of the guards leave in cars to prevent a disaster. They all begin to remember the instructions they learned in school. These two young security guards, after their car is filled, immediately set off, their destination being the crematorium. However, the guy in the driver's seat looks in the distant mirror and notices a guy who is wearing a second-rank uniform. This arouses his suspicions. These two decide to ask our main character if he is replacing the warden who is responsible for them. Only silence is heard in response. After a couple of moments, our main character comes up with something to say and informs the two guys in front that this is so, and an escape has been made from the 18th building. The news of the escape makes the driver turn around and be very surprised. Our main character continues saying that the criminal climbed over the fence from the northwest side. Next, our main character asks why the hell. When the escape is made, they stand in one place for so long and do not continue moving. These two young and inexperienced guards ask for forgiveness from their senior rank and immediately accelerate, greatly increasing the speed of the vehicle. Meanwhile, our main character, using his critical thinking, reflects on the fact that the path is in the northwest of the fence. Leads to a mountain called Junmyeon. At first glance, this is an ideal way to escape as it is very dark. There are no guards and the path is confusing. But there is also a significant disadvantage that makes this place not so ideal for escape. This disadvantage is a huge number of deadly traps. It is these traps that make this path the most dangerous escape route, but he uses this information that was only known to the guards. Through his genius, he will escape. The guy continues telling the young people that they will try to catch the fugitive on the way to escape, and if they lose them, they will go to the mountain in search of a corpse. This young and equally inexperienced guard recruit does not have a single question left. He unquestioningly obeys the fake guard. The course of events is interrupted until we reach our destination. We continue from here when the transport stops at the Iron Gate. After this car drives up to the gate, they call the secret code, and the guy who monitors the entrance notifies the rest of the security that everything is clear. Meanwhile, our main character, being under a perfect disguise and watching what is happening, understands that he is a real damn hitman of this Manhwa. Looking at the fence, which is covered in huge bloodstains, he understands that he will escape by climbing over this stone fence. The course of events is interrupted, and we move slightly ahead of the car inside which our hitman and two young people continue their route to their destination. Suddenly, the silence is interrupted by the driver of this transport, telling our main character that he is probably tired because of what happened in Building 18. The guy in response to this straightens his collar, smeared in blood, and replies that he is really tired, and it would be easier to finish off all these naughty prisoners. The guy behind the wheel picks up the guy's words, saying that these prisoners are complete scum, who are hunters in name only, but in reality are ordinary losers. Meanwhile, the second guard who is in front looks at our main character and begins to suspect him of something because he called the prisoners scum. Next, this guy asks the warden, or our undercover protagonist, how long ago he was on duty in the 18th building. Our main character clearly did not expect such a specific question, to which he clearly did not have a specific answer. Perhaps he even tensed up by 1%. He briefly answers that he came recently, or more specifically yesterday. The guy in front assumes that he was working in Block 9 then, Hitman confirms. However, our main character should be worried because this guy, who had resourcefulness, apparently sees through our main character. He tells our main character that he could serve in the 10th block, which does not even exist unless it was created the day before yesterday. Immediately after this incident, a real nightmare will probably begin in this transport. We watch as the armored vehicles stop in the middle of the road. However, instead of panicking, our main character smiles maniacally, realizing that his cover has just been blown. Realizing that words can no longer describe this situation, he reaches for his blade, which he recently received as a gift from a second-rank warden. The next moment, without waiting for the actions of his rivals, the guy makes a lightning attack with a blade that chops the chair in half, along with the person sitting in it. This inappropriately strong blow causes shock to the second driver, because just before his eyes, instead of one colleague, he immediately had two, just like Gojo Satoru. Meanwhile, our main character replies that the purpose of the non-existent 9th block is only to kill worthless scum like them. However, the driver, unlike the guy who cosplayed as Gojo Satoru in the last chapters of the magical battle, turned out to be not so stupid and abruptly braked the car. With such an unusual move, he managed to prevent the abrupt end of his life at the hands of our main character who was behind him. Next, we watch a bloody mess. After the car stops due to a sharp brake, the first guy flies out of it. After the car suddenly brakes, the guy in the cap summons a fireball, and pointing it at our main character calls him a crazy bastard. The next moment, this blonde man who was fighting for his life throws a fireball at the guy, but the guy easily dodges the powerful magical attack. However, despite the damage that the guy caused to the body of the car, he understands that if he had not managed to dodge, he would not have been very pleased. But this guy is not going to retreat. Taking advantage of the moment, he closes the distance with our main character and strikes in revenge for his colleague. After this, even though he had already used this technique just recently, he summons another fireball, asking the guy how he can deceive them. This time, the guy apparently puts a lot more force into his attack than last time, because this explosion is simply amazing in size. This powerful fire attack straight from the sky easily melts even the thick plate that made up the roof of an armor-piercing car. Somehow the driver who survived looks back and celebrates his early victory and calls the guy useless trash. But suddenly something makes his attention switch. Using the victim's peripheral vision, he sees something extremely strange. Looking at the side mirror of the car, he sees our main character who remains alive after a powerful blow like a nuclear explosion. The next moment, the guy uses his maximum level teleportation skill and instantly disappears from his place. A few moments later, the door window of the armor-piercing car breaks like a protective glass for iPhones, and the blade is pointed directly at the driver. Next, we observe a picture full of cruelty and indifference. Our main character, taking advantage of his phenomenal speed, takes the life of another guard. All this happens so quickly and incomprehensibly that the guy does not even immediately realize that his life is ending, and he will never again take top 1 in Fortnite. After this sad news, the killer assassin, with a confident movement of his hand, pulls out his blade from his victim, finally depriving him of his life. After a couple of moments, we watch from afar as our main character, having dealt with these two losers, throws the former driver of this car like garbage onto the ground. Immediately after this, our main character's head is struck by severe pain, which causes him to have cold sweats and a severe headache. Grabbing his head, our main character immediately understands what's wrong. He used too much mana in a short period of time. But our main character is forced to distract himself from his headache because he is obliged to pay attention to the fact that loud sounds begin to be heard behind him. Looking at the side rearview mirror, the guy sees in it that another car of these security guards is heading straight towards him, which is already very close. The guy with short blue hair understands that a patrol has come here that he didn't expect at all, but it's not so scary because he doesn't have much time left. After this, the guy makes a strong-willed, confident decision to leave the armor-piercing equipment and roll down the steep slope of the mountain on which he was located. Even though this mountain is located at an altitude of several hundred meters, our main character, without thinking at all, jumps down like a stone. While he is falling, he decides to use the nearest surface to slow his fall and increase his chance of survival. After a couple of moments, we watch as our main character, despite the great height, easily descends to the very bottom with zero preparation. But alas, not only our main character in this manhwa has an IQ above 80, because once downstairs he is met by a guy who was surprised that he coped with 2 guards and escaped. In front of him is a man in a leather jacket and with short hair who, holding a battle axe behind his head, calls the guy in front of him low-ranking trash. But our main character's attention is focused only on the red mark above his head, which means that this guy has a contract with some kind of constellation. He only knows the fact that his opponent also entered into a contract with the constellation, but he does not know what kind of power this guy has thanks to the contract. But after a couple of moments, a notification appears above the guy's head that tells us that the guy has a neutral constellation that allows him to track mana. After the assassin realizes that his opponent has the ability to track mana, he understands why he found him so easily. Next, the face of our main character breaks out into a manic smile again. He tells the guy that everything turned out very well and worked out. But the guy with the ability to track mana thanks to the constellation does not understand what our main character is talking about, and even with such a terrible smile. By focusing his vision on his opponent, the guy realizes that he can see with which constellation his opponent has a contract. Moreover, this red mark that hangs above his head shows that he really is in a contract with the constellation right now. At this moment, the third ability of our main character's constellation is finally revealed to us, which allows him to receive the constellation of the hunter he killed. Looking again at this guy with the ability, we understand why the guy was smiling. Even the notification hints to us that we can rob this target. Continuing to smile and looking at the guy as his victim, our main character understands that this is his first chance to test his ability to mine constellations. But the guy also realizes that if his opponent has a contract with the constellation, then he is at least level 100, so he needs to avoid direct face-to-face combat. Therefore, our main character needs to come up with a plan with which he can defeat an enemy superior to him in level and strength. That is why in the next frame we watch as our main one, rushing from his spot, realizes that he needs to lure the enemy and attack from an ambush. Meanwhile, the guy's opponent, looking at his pathetic move which looks like a pathetic attempt to escape, calls him low-ranking trash again. After some time of very fast running, our main character reaches a thick bush and then, at full speed, hides right there. But the guy with the ability to track mana looks in the direction where the assassin is hidden and tells him to try to hide better. The next shot we watch as this guy with an axe activates his ability to track targets using his mana level. Everything around this guy takes on a completely new color. Everything becomes just like during X-ray vision, but now he sees only mana. Having turned on his incredible ability to track anything, the guy continues to walk through the forest, looking around in search of our main character. Continuing to walk through the forest and examine every corner, he cannot detect a single source of mana, but he continues to diligently look for the guy. But after a couple of minutes of his valuable time, the guy finally notices an object that exudes a suspiciously large amount of mana. Trying to find this object and look at it closer, he sees an ordinary tree, but behind it there is something that exudes a huge level of mana. This escaped hunter immediately concludes that our main character is undoubtedly behind this tree. He immediately rejoices at the find. This guy in a leather jacket is so confident in his find that he begins to run headlong towards this tree, throwing his axes at it as he runs. These throwing axes are so powerful, like this guy, that they easily cut down a huge tree, but there is no one behind it. This guy is in complete shock, because he simply could not be fooled by his ability to detect mana. He wonders where this rat is. But it's too late. Everything around is very red. This is already familiar to us, so we understand that the life of this loser of the 100th level is close to its end. As I said, in the next frame we see a picture of how our main character, having delivered a precise blow to the throat of his opponent, leaves him no chance to survive. Next we watch as our main character criticizes this guy, saying that he was surprised that a melee fighter just threw his weapon. Meanwhile, the hunter for the escaped immediately changed his gaze to the gaze of the victim. He was dying hearing the words of our protagonist that he was mistaken in underestimating him. After this maximally cool line, our protagonist completes his fatal blow by looking at his opponent as if he were a complete loser. Apparently, each murder by our main character will take place in the format of first a cool phrase and then completion. Meanwhile, the hunter's corpse falls to the ground. Immediately after the death of this guy, a notification appears in front of us, which notifies us that after killing this target, the guy received his skill. The text of the notification continues, notifying that the constellation of skilled connectors is under the control of the constellation of our protagonist, and he will not be able to escape. After this easiest fight, our main character simply stands in front of the corpse and reads many notifications. From that moment, all the skills of the constellation of the killed person pass to him. Opening the list of his abilities, the guy sees that even the new skills that he received just after the murder have reached the maximum skill level due to his top constellation. That is why our main character received 2 new skills, mana tracking and night vision, which immediately became the maximum skill level. Immediately after receiving new cool skills, our main character activated mana tracking to check if there was anyone around him. Looking around with his imbecility enabled, our main character realized that right now there were no more pursuers around him. But a couple of moments after completing the use of new abilities, our main character again feels severe pain, which is much stronger than the previous one. This pain was comparable only to losing many matches in the League of Legends in a row. From this pain, the guy hunched over and began to tremble all over. Seeing that his condition had deteriorated much more than last time, the guy wondered if he had gone too far. Having moved to a very recent memory of the battle between the Bloodhound and our main character, we learned that in order to hide his tracks, he suppressed his increased sensitivity to mana and hid. And in order to take his opponent by surprise, he poured all his mana into an ordinary stone which he placed behind the tree. He also poured the rest of his vast reserves of mana into a mana stone that he had left over from the mine where he had recently mined these stones. After all, if he had left everything as it was, he would have exploded, just like at the beginning of the Manhwa, and sucked all the surrounding mana straight into himself. That is why during the last fight, he had to quickly suppress his increased sensitivity to mana by pouring it into objects. After he poured his reserves of Zama into an ordinary stone, he threw it into the very tree into which his opponent subsequently threw his weapon. It was thanks to this brilliant move that Magnus Carlsen himself would envy that our chief managed to lure the Bloodhound here for an attack. And after this ingenious decision, he was left with the easiest part, a surprise attack and the fastest attack using teleportation of the maximum level. But in order to get closer to his opponents from cover as quickly as possible, he had to use one of his abilities again. It was precisely because in this battle, he often used his abilities at the maximum level that he brought himself to such a deplorable state. The guy understood that if he overdid it a little more with the use of his powers, he would die right on the spot due to another attack of pain. Meanwhile, a new day was coming, and our main character moved in an unknown direction in order to find a safe place in which to hide. It didn't take long to search because after walking a few tens of meters, our main character stopped and looked somewhere down and saw a good option for shelter. The target of his eagle gaze was an ordinary truck that was transporting a huge amount of sand that was needed to purify the mana stones. After our main character saw a cool opportunity, he took advantage of his phenomenal speed to run towards the truck. Having quickly reached the cliff, he made the highest jump, the goal of which was to reach that same truck carrying sand to cleanse the mana stones. Next, we watch our protagonist successfully land directly on a truck, the drivers not suspecting it thanks to the grace of this guy's cat. After this landing of the shinobi, the guy fixed his gaze on the sky, which was very beautiful and picturesque. He also clearly appreciated it. The tired Giga Chad lay down on the sand and realized that during his escape he had killed 3 whole guards. He understood that this was not in the original novel. Having made himself comfortable in this comfortable cargo, the guy understood that he should try not to change the original until he became stronger, so he could use his knowledge. But the guy also understood that given his current insignificant position in this world at the moment, future ones should not somehow change because of the little things he did. Meanwhile, we continued as a truck filled with sand continued its confident movement towards its destination to clear the mana stones. The guy continued to enjoy his well-deserved rest. Being on top of the load of this transport, he was very pleased with what was around him. After all, there was stunning beauty around him, which consisted of a picturesque sunrise and the beautiful Caucasus Mountains that surrounded him. The course of events at this point is abruptly interrupted, and we are transported to a building in which there is talk about finding new low-ranking newcomers to mine mana stones. A man who was clearly important in this enterprise told his subordinate that he had nothing to worry about so he could return to work. After this guy's assistant left the office of the boss of this rocking chair, he began to talk about how our main character is damn smart. This big shot continued saying that he was amazed that some scum was able to take them by surprise and brazenly leave through the main gate. Meanwhile, returning to our main character, we watch as he, being in very poor condition, looked for a way to hide. Due to the excessive use of his mana, his stamina was restored very slowly. Meanwhile, the guy was typing some kind of password on the panel. Meanwhile, the big shot continued to talk about the incident of killing the level 45 and 55 guards, with the constellation being only a level 10 assassin. After our main character barely made it to the phone booth, he called some number and said that his name was Kang Ho. The people on the other line were very surprised by what they heard. The guy continued by saying that right now he is at Daejeon Station. The guy continued the conversation. He was asked if he could be asked for this favor. Kang Ho listened carefully to his interlocutor. Meanwhile, the budget Wolverine, who was clearly a big shot in some organization, decided that the hunt for our main character would be interesting. The course of events is interrupted, and we are transported to someone's apartment. We hear our main character thanking the owner of this apartment for the help provided to him. He continues to thank the girl for treating him. Even though he appeared out of nowhere, the girl asked the guy what happened to him and whether he was in a military zone. The guy briefly answered this girl that he was kidnapped by an organization called Eclipse. The girl was very surprised by the news she heard. A caring girl with short hair asked our main character if he was forced to mine mana stones because they are known for kidnapping hunters. Kang Ho replied that mining mana stones requires mana, so low-ranking hunters like him easily become prey for other hunters. Meanwhile, the guy was thinking that despite everything that happened, he decided to trust Han So-yeon and get in touch with her, putting himself at risk. A couple of moments later, our main character turned around to find that the girl who had just bandaged his wounds began to cry and ask for forgiveness. Wiping her tears, she said that if she had called him more often, he would not have to go through this hell. At the time of their separation, she was a newcomer who had just awakened. But now this girl has changed. She is now at level 150 and even has a contract with the constellation, as the red mark above her head tells us. Putting his hand on his head, the guy thought that if this girl had been with him, she would also have ended up in the Junmian detention center. Next, the guy, being bandaged, thanked the girl again and said that nothing good would come of them if she contacted him because Eclipse would be able to track her down. The girl tried to stop Kang Ho by saying that she was level 150, and at this level it is not so easy for ordinary hunters like them to harm her. However, our main character was a Sigma, so he wasn't going to be the one who depended on a woman, so he turned around and told her that she didn't need to worry about him. As he walked away, the guy continued saying that she just needed to use her great power for her own good and not volunteer. Next, we see that this girl, before leaving our main character, provided him with clothes, cash, and a hacked phone that is almost impossible to track. After this, the guy said that it looks like the guild the girl belongs to is still operating in gray territories. The guy continued by saying that it seems that, just like then and now, the guild suits her, and this is what apparently became the reason for their separation. Next, this girl with short hair decided to take a desperate step by asking our main character if he would join their guild. Kang-ho turned around after hearing the girl's proposal and said that they can do the same as before, but he stopped in time and stopped his remark. He raised his hand and told the girl that she shouldn't cling to their past together. Instead, she should just let it go. These words touched her to the very depths of this girl's soul, and tears of sadness immediately began to flow in her eyes. The girl was unable to contain this flow of feelings that suddenly surged into her head, so instead of saying anything, she silently cried. But the girl managed to stop and look at our main character, saying that she thought that's what would happen. The girl continued turning to our main character, saying that she fulfilled his request because one of her friends is the head of the guild. The details are on the phone. Then the girl's face broke into a smile. She clasped her hands in front of her and asked the guy to take care of himself. Next, the girl wished Kang-ho good luck, and he, in turn, thanked the girl again for her help and said that he hoped that everything would be fine for her too. After this, some time passes, and the guy leaves the house where this girl lives and gets into the taxi he recently called to his destination, Daejeon Station. Moving into the taxi cabin, we watch the taxi driver ask the guy if he can turn on the radio. Kang-ho doesn't mind at all. After the taxi driver turns on the news at the first station, we hear the news that the Yunghwan Guild has completely destroyed a group of White Rose mercenaries. White Rose's base was located in Johnson, Gangwon-do. It is a rapidly growing criminal organization. The day of judgment has come. This day has come quickly and quietly. Next, we watch a young man who told his wife that today is a strange day, because even though it is the weekend, there is not a single soul on the street. But after he did not hear an answer to his question, the concerned man turned to his wife to make sure everything was okay. However, his wife was far from okay. Some mystical energy made her die right on the spot, depriving her of facial skin and hair, leaving her with a bare skull. The guy was simply in shock. In front of him, it was as if there were stills from a new Saw, because this sight was terribly disgusting and scary. Immediately after the death of this young man's wife, his death followed. He was followed by literally dead death, which, with its scythe, was in a hurry to take his life. Events in this city developed rapidly. We watched as these strange reapers who looked like death flew from above and killed everyone. Then we switched to the next frame in which the TV channel presenter reports that right now the sky over the city is purple. According to the reports, there are monsters in the region. The report is abruptly interrupted when some huge monster rams this fragile TV channel presenter right on the air. Her last phrase is described as clearly as possible. On that day, the events happening in this city were similar to the events in Shibuya. Like in a magical battle, the city was shrouded in a dark curtain and there were a lot of monsters inside. But among those who gained strength amid this chaos are called hunters. They were engaged in eliminating numerous monsters and saving ordinary people. This inexplicable event with the beginning of the apocalypse made people believe in the beginning of doomsday. Absolutely everyone who saw it was in terrible panic. Hunters who at first killed only monsters after a while began to kill people, first in the name of God, and then for no reason at all. At that moment, the greater threat became not the ordinary monsters that the hunters had previously eliminated, but the hunters themselves who moved to kill ordinary innocent people. However, at that moment when all of humanity was approaching its end, in the background, meanwhile, we are watching a crowd of hunters attacking a lonely girl. A crazy psychopathic hunter with violet eyes tried to calm the girl down by telling her that after one blow, everything would end painlessly. It was at that moment when all of humanity lost faith in salvation that the one who began to be called the savior of the world appeared. We watch as someone stopped the sword with his bare hands. Then, when the blonde easily stopped the sword, he turned to the girl and asked if she was okay. We know this guy named Chang Shi-hwan. This savior of humanity who sowed hope in the hearts of people was based in Seoul, and there he was able to gather a group of assistant protectors and healers. It was after the guy was able to gather people on his own to protect humanity that a guild called Chunhwan was formed in honor of its leader. For this reason, absolutely all people really want to get to the very safe village in which Chang Shi-hwan, whom all people love so much, has settled. Smiling and listening to the radio, the guy realized that the White Rose group had long been tracked down by Hunter Chang Shi-hwan for organizing a terrorist attack at Exit 11 of Gangnam Station in Seoul. However, the White Rose group was not a terrorist organization, but the taxi driver, meanwhile, was surprised that the hero of humanity was able to destroy a terrorist organization without a kiss. But our main character understood that this group was in no way involved in the terrorist attack. It was all the work of Chang Shi-hwan, who was trying to look good in the eyes of the people. The taxi driver continued to tell our main character that his son had recently awakened and dreams of joining the guild of Gigacha Jiang Shihuan. Meanwhile, our main character understood that if he went against Jiang Shihuan and revealed that all this was his doing, then he would have made him an enemy in the eyes of all mankind, as he already did at the very beginning of the manhwa, and the result would have been clear as day. That is why our main character asked him to help him join a group of mercenaries, since any guild is within his reach. Meanwhile, the course of events accelerated a little and continued with the fact that we arrived at our destination, and the taxi driver notified us about this once again. Getting out of the car and looking at the building, our main character understood that the best thing for him was to be a mercenary who receives tasks only from a group of mercenaries. A girl almost immediately comes out to meet our main character, extends her hand to him, greets him, and introduces herself, saying that she has already heard a lot about him. After this, a girl with long hair and high heels introduces herself to our main character, saying that her name is Li Ye Rin. Meanwhile, Kang Ho realizes that it is too early for him to reveal all his cards, which is why he extends his hand to the girl and briefly introduces himself by saying his name. A girl with an irresistible appearance shakes hands with our main character and, smiling, says that she is very happy about this meeting. Having entered the building, the girl begins to dig through her folder with documents. Then he tells our main character that she has an excellent job of collecting information. Our main character immediately refuses, saying that he would like something with a good reward. He said that they were giving him difficult tasks from the very beginning. This girl is surprised, saying that if she remembers correctly, she heard that our main character has only the 10th level. The guy does not hide this. In response to our main character's serious request to give him more difficult tasks, and hearing about the 10th level, the girl begins to laugh at the noob who is standing in front of her. The girl starts laughing so hard at a level 10 noob who wants a difficult task that she starts to cry from laughing. After this girl finishes laughing, her emotions instantly change. She becomes very serious and asks if he wants her to take care of his corpse. However, the guy is not at all intimidated by the serious tone and face of this girl. Instead, he asks if being a mercenary does not mean having skills regardless of level. Looking at the constellation that this girl possesses, we see that she has a chaos observer that has the ability to block or distort vision. This girl, named Li Ye Rin, is a mage and buffer who entered into a contract with an above-average level constellation. She was created by him one fine day. The role of this girl, who had great power, was to confront the 13 stars and the main evil in this universe. Standing in front of her, the guy understood that he simply needed to gain her trust, so he had to do anything for this. After our main character asked whether the most important skills for a mercenary are the skills, regardless of level, silence fell between the two. After some time, the silence is interrupted by this girl who is in a hurry to disappoint our main one by saying that, alas, reality differs from fiction. After this phrase, the two went to meet each other, but after passing each other, the guy told this girl that prejudices are also different. Hearing this, the girl's mood rose noticeably. She smiled widely and raised her glasses. She said that in this case, she needed to test his skills. After this phrase, the two moved away from each other at a decent distance, and a dead silence hung between them. Probably even the wind tried to pass by with caution. Next, this girl began to charge the Rasengan, but only green. She said that in this battle she wanted to check one thing. After this girl finished preparing her green Sharingan, she asked Kang Ho if he could evade her skill. The guy standing in front of this girl asked her if she wanted to check if he could protect his body in this way. The girl replied that he thinks correctly, and she wants to test his ability to evade. This means that he may have an opportunity to attack. Looking at this girl's technique, Kang Ho immediately realized that she uses the creation of puppets using fog and the ability to track anyone with the help of a dark tracker. The guy immediately realized while watching the technique that this was not an attacking skill, so he wouldn't die if he couldn't dodge and missed a hit. But if he doesn't dodge, then he will have marks left and the test will end immediately, which is why the guy started beating himself on the chest, telling the girl to attack faster. Meanwhile, the girl with her strange green technique began to swing at our main character in order to strike. After a couple of moments, we see how the girl actually sent a foggy phantom directly at our main character with good speed. While this green phantom continued its movement, our main character took a stance in order to be ready to dodge this projectile. After the phantom finally reached our main character, it suddenly exploded, creating a rather large explosion, but our main character was no longer inside. After some time, the smoke from this Sigma Mom's attack cleared, and she was puzzled by the fact that the guy with whom she had recently been in battle had disappeared somewhere. Looking up, this girl was very surprised because she did not expect to see Kang Ho running through the building while he was in front of her a couple of seconds ago. Looking at how our main character confidently ran along the walls as if it were the floor, she couldn't believe her eyes because at the 10th level, it's difficult to make a jump even a meter. The girl continued to be surprised by every little thing she saw because this guy was damn skillfully mastered the basic skills of a killer. After all, it was a short jump. Distance. Then the girl, continuing to watch her opponent, smiled and realized that in front of her was not an empty talker, and he clearly knew what he was talking about. After a couple of moments, this warrior decided that she needed to charge up another more powerful attack. She asked the guy if he could dodge her attack again. Literally a moment later, the girl fired another charge using her technique, but this time it looked like a bazooka shot. The shot was so powerful and fast that after a couple of milliseconds it was very close to touching our main character and causing serious damage. After a couple of moments, the guy turned around and saw a green phantom in front of him, which was very close to touching him and exploding. However, our main character could not stop surprising this girl. Even though he had a low body level, he had a 100th Sigma level, so he was able to dodge. After a collision with our main character, a green phantom burst in several times more powerful than the last time. He even almost reached this girl. As I said, the power of the explosion was enough to touch the sender of the phantom, and moreover cause some damage to her. But after the smoke cleared once again, the girl saw the guy disappear, just like his father leaving for bread and not returning. Taking a closer look and using her combat intelligence coefficient, the girl realized that this guy only used the teleport skill in such a short time. Meanwhile, Kang Ho was already behind the girl with his blade ready to deal a crushing blow to this girl. However, instead of canonically saving his target from life, our main character stopped in front of the girl's throat and froze, thereby showing that he would have won. After our main character found this girl in such a losing position, he suggested that she finish their text at that moment. However, in response to this, the girl with a quick movement of her head looked back at our main character and smiled at him. After finishing this test, our main character thought that this girl was faster than he thought because she became a mercenary commander for a reason. Slowly removing her throat from Kang Ho's sword, she asked him if he had to train before because he is very experienced. Continuing to hold his sword at the girl's throat, the guy briefly answered that he had never trained to learn what he could do. Slowly putting away the sword with 2 fingers of our main character, the girl stated that noobs of the 10th level can only stand on the sidelines and watch, which is not to say about him. The guy decided to make sure that he passed by asking about it. He was told that he could be entrusted with a level 50 task with peace of mind. Hearing the answer that Kang Ho gave, he put away his sword, then placed it near his legs and packed it back out of harm's way. The course of events is interrupted and continues with our main character, together with the mercenary commander, heading somewhere in a not very luxury car. While this woman continues to drive to her destination, she looks in the rearview mirror to see what our main character is doing. The girl asked if the guy was interested in the bulletproof glass that was installed here. She explained that it was there because recently, an annoying Valorant fan had been on her tail. In the next shot, the girl made a kawaii face and reassured Kang Ho by saying that she was just joking. The real reason was that she received a lot of attention from the Eclipse guys. A little further, the girl summons a green phantom who holds a parchment and reports that this is a task to track a dangerous bandit. The girl reports that she is the customer this time, and this order will be useful for Kang Ho. The green phantom carefully brings the parchment to Kang Ho. The destination is Gyeonggi-Osan, an open dungeon which currently has the status of an abandoned ruin and an open dungeon. And if more specifically, the target of the task is a level 50 mage named Kim Moon-hyun, the mission is to request the extraction of a rank 3 item, Bastard Boots. Continuing his acquaintance with the task, Kang Ho asks the customer whether he must return him alive. The mercenary commander replies with a smile that he can finish him off, because recently too many civilians have died because of Kim Soo-hyun. The woman with the scar continued by saying that our protagonist could execute him on the spot. The National Security Agency would also like that. After our bloodthirsty protagonist, as we know, heard permission to execute, he said that he understood everything and would immediately begin his operation. Meanwhile, we are watching the same abandoned place, ruins, and also the target of the task, who walks through these ruins as if it were his home. Before these two get there, the girl warns our main character that the target of the execution is probably hiding somewhere, so it won't be easy for him. And it will be difficult not because he hides well. The real reason will be that these abandoned ruins are too large to quickly detect the target. But Kang Ho was charged positively because for him, this place was not bad for his debut. This place Shin Kang-hu used as a hideout in the original, so he is familiar with it. And besides all this, once at the place of the task, our main character remembered that in this place there are quite useful bosses for the average level. After Kang Ho saw the mobs, or rather the little bosses that he was looking for, he stopped because he needed to farm them. Due to the fact that our main character was the author of this short story, he knew how to awaken real monsters from these harmless hairs, so he bled himself with his blade. After these monstrous creatures smelled blood, they went wild in the same way that Roblox players become mad when they see a lot of power-up cans. Immediately after this crowd of bloodthirsty white rabbits smelled the blood of our main character, they immediately pounced on him to tear him to pieces. Despite their frantic speed, Kang Ho was quite easy to avoid their attacks thanks to his teleport, which was pumped to the maximum thanks to the constellation. It was also not difficult for our main character to attack these small but no less useful bosses, because he used a short-distance jump for this task. The secret to the success of farming these creatures was monstrously simple. All he had to do was repeat this pattern with a dodge during the attack, thereby not receiving damage. And after he avoided the blow, he could only use his second assassin skill to make a powerful lunge for an attack. Farming these rabbits, thanks to the pumped-up abilities of our main character, went very quickly, while he finished off the last rabbit. After he made the final blow looking behind him, we realized that everything was so fast that the carcasses of these bosses did not even have time to reach the ground. Remembering the words of the customer, we understand that our main character's task was to get the item. He could do everything else at his own discretion. As soon as our main character relaxed a little, some strong avatar appeared behind him, who had a red aura and possessed 2 blades. Continuing to remember the details of the conversation between these two that we missed, we understand that the customer asked directly our main character what reward he wants. The guy interrupted his mewing session and replied that as a reward for this mission, he would only need a license to clear dungeons. After a couple of moments, we see a notification in front of us that allows our main character to acquire boss skills by killing them, so he needs dungeons with many final bosses. Looking at this phantom with red eyes and an angry look, we understand that this mob is the very useful mob that we were talking about before arriving here. After Kang Ho notices this handsome guy, he smiles and says that he has finally found a useful mid-level boss. A sign appeared above the head of this evil boss, which notified that a skill could be stolen from this boss, and the boss in turn told the guy that he would kill him. This guy looked at this necessary boss of his like he was his prey, and asked him to stop just standing there and yapping like a chihuahua. A couple of moments after this mid-level boss rushed towards our main character in order to decapitate him with the help of his blades. The speed of this boss was truly amazing, because after a couple of moments this mob was very close to our main character, jumping from the roof. He moved so fast that from the outside it might seem that there were a large number of these bosses, but this was only an illusion due to the high speed. Meanwhile, a whole region of these assassin bosses was approaching our main character and was ready to tear him to shreds. After the original boss reached our main character, he began to swing in flight to make a blow that was most likely lethal for our main character. A couple of milliseconds later, this blow was made right on the head of our main character, but everything was unsuccessful because the guy, like the lightning of Konoha, Minato Uzumaki, avoided the blow. After Kang Ho safely escaped the attack, he understood that his opponent was trying to pretend that this was his main attack, but in reality, it was. The actual attack from this boss rushed towards our protagonist from the other side and almost reached him. He was able to identify it by tracking his mana level. Immediately after the guy realized what was wrong here, he used a short-distance jump and with his blade made a hole in the stomach of this boss. But this time, our protagonist's opponent only needed 1 blow to win. The monster immediately tried to counterattack the guy. The guy easily used his ability to teleport for the second time during the battle, thereby remaining unharmed. Once again finding himself behind the mid-level boss from Roblox, the guy understood that his opponent's close combat was quite rough and could be taken advantage of. Immediately after this, our protagonist struck the weak side of this boss's leg in order to make him fall to his knees. His plan worked as clearly as a Swiss watch. This boss, as our main character had planned, fell to his knees when wounded. After Kang Ho's opponent remained in the most vulnerable and most advantageous position for him, he summoned his blade from his inventory. Immediately after the sword was summoned directly into the hand of our protagonist, he was preparing to execute this boss and steal his skills. Before striking, our main character analyzed and realized that the most vulnerable part of this boss was the uncovered surface of the body near the neck. Immediately after this, literally a second passed and our main character carried out a lightning execution on this boss, which did not leave him any chance. Seeing that this blow caused great pain to his opponent, he clenched his hands in order to turn the blade even deeper to cause even more damage. Immediately after this, Kang Ho pulled out his huge blade from the boss's neck, thereby depriving him of his life and pathetically stepping aside despite this loser. After a few seconds, returning to the boss's body, we begin to witness Kang Ho's victory as the boss begins to disintegrate into particles. After this boss completely disintegrates, a notification appears in front of our main character notifying him that he has received the illusion skill. At this time, our main character is trying to catch his breath after using several of his abilities at once, but judging by his smile, he is happy with this fight. After a couple of moments, we notice that in the building that is located behind our main one, some kind of glimpse appears, which means that he is being watched. At this moment, those watching Kang Ho see him picking up loot from this powerful boss. The item picked up by the guy is called Salatium. Next, we watch a bunch of raiders who were watching the guy. One of them asks another raider if he saw this item, because it is difficult to get it. The pumped-up raider with red hair was called Jo Young-jae. He was a third-rank Osan hunter. They did not expect that Kang Ho would kill Ventus by hitting his weak point. Next, a girl from this gang, addressing the third-rank hunter, calling him boss, tells him that she saw this guy in the store. According to the girl, at that time he bought Sevier's brisket, kobold blood, and sleeping pills for monsters from the merchant. She was surprised by such an unusual purchase. Next, the merchant asked our main character if he would like to buy a dagger. It all looked like he was going to farm monsters in the dungeon. However, instead of the usual dungeon farming, this guy single-handedly killed the boss, surprising these three. They said that this kid looked like a skilled killer. Meanwhile, the stern boss with big muscles understood that this guy was not the kind of hunter who should be in a dungeon of this level. Next, the girl asked her jock boss if they should go after Kang Ho to drag him here and put him on his knees, but the guy rejected the offer. The man with red hair made a strange face and said that it would be much easier if they allowed him to continue farming, after which they would rob him. The attractive girl with two ponytails was amazed by her boss's brilliant thinking. She said that she expected such a brilliant solution. While these raiders were waiting for our main character to get tired and they would attack, our main character continued to gain level after level by putting all his points into stamina. The guy explained his decision by saying that as long as he controls the increased sensitivity to mana, he does not need to pump up mana, so he will invest everything in stamina. After Kang Ho invested enough ability points into his stamina, he sighed because he finally felt alive. Another reason for the good health of our protagonist was the Salatium that he ate. It had a calming analgesic effect. This plant was also an excellent remedy for suppressing hypersensitivity to mana. It is difficult to obtain in a regular dungeon. And since it grows naturally, it is difficult to put it into mass production, but there is only one person in the country who knows how to grow it. But this man is at the epicenter of terrifying events where a huge number of monsters are roaming, so it was difficult to find him. Looking around, our main character understands that this place used to be called a demilitarized zone, but he understood that he needed to go there as quickly as possible. But the guy was haunted by the thought of what if he was overtaken by his illness in the form of high sensitivity to mana during an intense battle. He will immediately experience that same terrifying attack of sharp pain that will greatly prevent him from continuing the fight. And if this happened in the battle of our protagonist against a mid-level boss, then his opponent would undoubtedly retain victory. But the guy, continuing to walk around the destroyed city, realized that in order to get to the place he needed, he would need a lot of money. Then the course of events is interrupted, and we are transported back to the same van driven by a woman who is at the head of the mercenaries. She tells someone that just a year ago the quality of the connection was not so bad, but it has gotten worse. Someone is trying to interfere so they can't do anything. Moreover, this girl must be under Eclipse or the Black Lion, and it will only get worse, she agreed. The mercenary commander's telephone conversation continues. Her interlocutor continues to say that she probably had a hard time after he contacted Eclipse. Meanwhile, the girl who drove the van began to notice that someone had been following her all this time. She replies that everything is fine and begins an attempt to escape. She immediately presses the gas pedal to the floor and drives away, because she has already become accustomed to walking and looking around for a long time. While she continues to skillfully get rid of the tail that is chasing her, the interlocutor on the phone asks her if she has a hunter whom she could recommend. Meanwhile, the mercenary commander makes just the coolest feint by creating a whole mountain of garbage that will allow her to get rid of her pursuers. As expected, through this, she managed to get rid of the chase. The girl's neighbor reports that lately he has been short of employees. Continuing to try to go to a safe place, the telephone conversation continues, informing her that she was contacted precisely about this. But the girl, who is happy that she escaped the chase, replies in a calm voice as if nothing had happened, that she doesn't know if she can provide him with people. Next, we see the same guy who will be responsible for the death of all humanity. The girl tells him that she can recommend a hunter for our main character named Chang Shi-huan. While the blonde continues to check various papers, he tells the girl that most likely all of her mercenaries will be rejected because he has raised his standards. Now everyone should have an emerald in the League of Legends. The guy with blonde hair continues saying that he is going to take a low-level mercenary to raise him from a low level. However, the mercenary commander hastens to please this guy by saying that she just has one potential mercenary who fits his request. This woman continues by saying that she thinks that he needs a little more time because she does not want to make the mistake of jumping to conclusions. However, the guy with blonde hair, continuing to study the mercenaries' profiles, tells the girl that she is never mistaken with her arguments. Suddenly, we watch as the girl becomes suddenly sad. The fake hero of humanity expresses his condolences that they have lost many due to the accident. However, the girl returns to normal mood, saying that this is all in the past and should not be given much importance. She will continue to watch him. But the telephone conversation does not end there. The guy in white clothes asks the mercenary commander if she has any useful information for him. In response to this woman tells the blonde that she has information from insiders about criminal organizations in Seoul. Next, these two agree that it will be most convenient to transfer this information to each other by sending an email after some time. The blonde replies that this does not cause any difficulty for him, because he can share such information with her as much as he likes. Continuing the telephone conversation, the guy looks at his subordinates and declares that his guild simply needs talented people. Meanwhile, we see the target of this bastard's gaze. This is a mercenary who is surrounded by guards. The guy asks the girl to send him someone worthy. Making the most gloomy face that does not look like the face of a savior, the guy assures that he will make a cool Sigma out of low-level mercenaries in the best possible way. Having finished the conversation, this woman exhales and continues driving. She thinks that she does not understand why this guy has such high expectations. She didn't understand why this blonde had such high expectations for our main character, who had recently received his first request. Returning to our main character in the abandoned city, we watched as he continued his farming, killing boss after boss and monster after monster. At the moment, Kang Ho was busy killing another mid-level boss named Ibri. He was already almost defeated. Despite his injuries, this mid-level boss continued to hold on and fight, but judging by our main character, he was already starting to get tired. After a couple of moments, we watch as the boss gathered his strength to carry out his special attack using his skills. After a couple of seconds, this boss's hand reached a huge size and went straight to Kang Ho. This skill was called abduction. After this huge demonic hand almost reached our main character, a sight appeared on him, letting us know that the hand was not going anywhere. But after this hand was supposed to pierce through this guy's body, our main character again, as if nothing had happened, disappeared as if he were not there. This obviously greatly shocked this boss, who was already anticipating his victory, but in the end he could only shit his pants. After all, after the girl attracted the target of her skill, a huge stone turned out to be in her hand. Our main character fooled this loser boss. Meanwhile, the real Kang Ho was on the battlefield and quickly ran. He caught the boss by surprise thanks to his illusion skill. While running around his target, our main character realized that this kidnapping boss's skill had a big gap that he simply had to take advantage of right now. However, the mid-level boss was not going to be left in the cold, which is why what we see next is how the battle continues by throwing a huge stone at the guy. Possessing reflexes like a tiger, this guy easily dodges a huge boulder without even using a jump or other abilities. Meanwhile, this huge boulder continues its flight and crashes with tremendous force into the nearest wall. After this, the mid-level boss, looking at this boulder, sees the hand of our main character, which is located under this huge stone. But after a couple of seconds, this hand turns blue, and we understand that our main character has again outwitted the boss by creating another illusion. This boss is in complete confusion because he was already confident of his certain victory, but for the second time, he was fooled like a baby playing Roblox. And the real Kang Ho at that moment used teleportation to get behind this nasty boss who imagined a lot about himself. In the next frame, we observe the already familiar practice of summoning one's blade to quickly execute the boss and end this battle. A couple of moments later, we watch a scene similar to the first death of Gojo Satoru from Toji, because our main character pierces this boss from behind in the same way. To comply with all his canons of coolness and the Sigma code, the guy pulls out his blade and pathetically shakes the blood onto the asphalt. Notifications immediately appear that notify you about defeating the middle boss and increasing your level. Our main character is again going to invest all his level points in stamina. And after the boss defeated by our main character begins to disintegrate, another notification appears that notifies us that this boss's skill has been stolen. At this moment, our main character receives into his arsenal of skills the abduction skill, which is immediately at the maximum level, but it only has a fixed range of action. After this guy finishes this battle, he carefully reads the skill that he just received and, wondering, returns his blade to his inventory. Immediately after the blade disappears, he decides to try out the abduction skill he just learned. He summons a demonic hand and aims at something. The purpose of using the stealing skill will be an ordinary army blade that just lies on the floor and does not bother anyone. After the guy uses his skill, his arm stretches and easily picks up a dagger that lies 10 meters away from him. Then this sword is immediately drawn into the hand of our main character. He understands that this way he can use objects in battle. He understands that if he uses this skill as correctly as possible, then he will undoubtedly be able to fight much more effectively. Next, our main character catches that same motivation at 3 in the morning and lunges, making 3 blows with the dagger he picked up. This gang of losers had been watching our main character all this time, and even now they were watching him with interest, surprised by his movements. As I said, these 3 continued to rush after Kang Ho, waiting for him to get tired in order to rob him, but he began to scare them with his skill. Meanwhile, the head of these losers called the guy a real killer because he had just defeated Iberia without the help of a tank, completely alone. This muscular guy's subordinates asked him again if he had any desire to finally bring this idiot back to Earth. But in response to this proposal, the guy got angry, reminding his idiots that he had already named a plan in which they should choose the moment when he is exhausted. The course of events is interrupted, and we begin to observe the very goal of our main character, from whom he must take an important item and execute him. Meanwhile, this uncouth man with long hair and looking terrible is sitting somewhere and reading some documents while continuing to eat something. These documents say that the Black Lion approved the permission for Kim Mok-hyun to join, so the information about the Blue Gaze needs to be conveyed to Ye-rin. Meanwhile, the target of our main character's mission, sitting on the corpses, makes a joke that he was trying to eat and called everything he read good news. He also assumes that Ye-rin is quite nervous about trying to catch him, and they are probably going to execute him as well. He also calls Eclipse and Black Lion good guilds. This guy is happy that he can finally get to Dijon for the first time in a very long time. Meanwhile, we go downstairs, watching as our main character reaches the building where the goal of his task is located. Stopping at this building, Kang Ho looks up, realizing that his mission goal is probably here. This distraught man sees our main character, but he doesn't panic at all, but on the contrary, he sees in this guy another simpleton whom he can rob. Next, this guy, just like Megumi from the magical battle, summons 2 huge hounds telling them that it is their time to eat. Immediately after this guy voices his order, these 2 hounds take off to devour our main character. These hounds easily jump from a multi-story building and try to pounce on our main character in order to quickly get rid of him. However, Kang Ho is not even going to engage in battle with these dogs. Instead, he summons a piece of delicious meat from his inventory which he shows to the hounds. Immediately after these hellhounds see a piece of meat, they immediately stop and reconsider their master's order. Meanwhile, a man with disheveled hair stands still and cannot understand what kind of nonsense just happened. Continuing to watch how his hellish hounds, stopping peacefully near our main character, begin to wag their tails and eat meat, he is surprised at the guy's genius. But our main character is also not an ordinary simpleton, because he was not going to just feed the dogs, because in the next frame he summons his blade. The next shot is not for the faint of heart, because our main character, without remorse, calmly deals with this dog by plunging a blade into its skull while he was eating meat. So he continues this killing procedure and kills all 3 hounds that belong to his target, at which point the guy begins to get nervous. Next, our main character looks at his rival, who is left completely without his psychos, and asks him if he would like to bite this meat. We remember the scene when our main character was preparing to farm in this place. At that moment, he bought the best piece of meat from the butcher. It was thanks to this luxurious piece of meat that he easily dealt with these 3 hellhounds without even engaging in direct combat with them. At this moment, the target of our main character's task hears a warning from the Gigachad that if his life is dear to him, then he should return what he stole. Meanwhile, an uncouth man standing on a tall building shouts to the guy that if he needs it, let him take it, if of course he can. Our main character, the child killer, has enough of what he heard because immediately after this he takes off from his place in order to catch up with this man. Meanwhile, the guy is trying to remain calm. He understands that his opponent is better prepared than him, but he is sure that he is smarter than our main character. Watching our main character try to get to this idiot at full speed, he shouts at him to try to bypass the traps he has set. Meanwhile, we observe that there are indeed traps in this building, but our main character does not intend to stop for a second. After all, instead of stopping, he continues to run and simply turns on his ability to track mana in order to see traps. With the help of this ingenious move, which works perfectly, the guy sees all the traps that are located here. Indeed, there are a lot of them. In order not to bother with this huge number of traps, our main character deprives him of using the jump skill and skips these unnecessary tests. Meanwhile, the victim who is watching Kang Ho, who is getting closer and closer to him every second, scolds him for avoiding all his traps. This uncouth man no longer intends to endure humiliation from our main character. He gathers his strength and asks the guy if he really thinks that he was scared. Meanwhile, our protagonist looks at his opponent and learns that he possesses the Chaos Fighter constellation, which provides effective ways to weaken the opponent's senses and vision. Next, this homeless man begins his attack on the guy. He heart-rendingly shouts to him that he will know the full power of his black magic. This idiot didn't know that our main character doesn't care about all the attacks that need to be hit, because the guy can just use the maximum level teleporter. Immediately after he successfully dodges a powerful magical projectile, he makes a jump that reduces the distance to this loser. Looking at his opponent using critical thinking, he understands that he is approximately level 50, and more specifically, he is a black magician with the constellation of loss of sensitivity. Meanwhile, the guy continues to run after his opponent in order to complete his task. He already understood what he roughly needs to do to win. But this cunning idiot also had a couple of aces in his hand, or so he thought, because he was sure that after his next move, the guy would not be saved. Continuing to run deeper into the building, this loser used his ability of blindness in the hope of saving himself and turning the tide of the battle. The reaction of our main character immediately allowed him to understand what was happening, so he carefully followed what was happening. Despite the opportunity to dodge, our main character continued to wait for the right moment. The darkness continued to quickly move towards him. Even considering that this darkness with the effect of blindness continued to rapidly rush towards him, he continued to wait for the perfect moment. Having waited for the perfect timing when the black curtain was about to touch him, he simply closed his eyes with the help of his blade. Seeing this, the uncouth idiot was simply beside himself. He did not expect that his blindness technique could be avoided in such a simple way without using skills. After our main character made his way into the veil of darkness of his enemy, he was asked how he was able to get here without going blind. Removing the blade from his eyes, Kang Ho smiles, saying that it was very easy for him to avoid his ability, because he created it with his own hands. At this time, the guy began to aim at his target with his new abduction skill. The guy was confused by his strange answer about his technique. In the next frame, we see how our main character, thanks to his ability, easily grabs his opponent in a huge demonic hand. This eccentric is at a loss because he did not expect this skill, but not because he is stupid, but because only monsters and other mobs have such a skill. Immediately after our main character attracts this bastard to himself after using the abduction skill, he gives his kidney very joyful and vibrant sensations. This eccentric with uncouth hair understands that his situation after this blow is worse than ever, which is why he tries to use his mana burning technique. After using this technique, this one explodes so strongly that our main character is forced to retreat back to a safe distance. After some time, the smoke from the explosion clears and this guy, having been wounded, continues to perform a barrage of magical attacks, forcing Kang Ho to run away and dodge. The guy, even while running, is able to analyze what is happening on the battlefield. He understands that his opponent used some kind of object because his attacks are too fast. However, continuing to run away and dodge many attacks from his enemy, our main character continues to think about what he should do now. Suddenly, our main character stops hanging on the building. The guy immediately rushes to take advantage of this opportunity to destroy him. Because this guy has a cursed constellation, he begins to lose his mind and he fires a powerful shot at our protagonist. Immediately after this magical projectile reaches Kang Ho with amazing speed, a huge smoke screen from the explosion appears again. After the smoke clears, the guy watches our main character fall down like a sack filled with potatoes. Seeing that his attack has finally brought at least some fruit, he smiles widely and, approaching our main character in order to kill him, asks him to attack. But as soon as he takes a few steps forward to look at the lifeless body of our main character, he sees a whole bunch of illusions. Realizing that he was fooled again, he again goes into hellish anger mode. He again calls on his damn magic to destroy the guy. This dark magician raises his hands up, after which he performs a magical attack that causes a huge explosion on the entire platform that was under him. But alas, shadow clones like Naruto's and the original Kang Ho himself were not only below. Meanwhile, our two main characters quickly ran to the bastard. The guy already ceases to understand what is happening, because no matter what he does in this battle, this damn Naruto Uzumaki always turns out to be one step ahead of him. But this time our main character circled this loser almost 3 times for a couple of seconds, because then we see Kang Ho stabbing this loser with a knife. Then the guy pulls out his blade, thereby causing a fountain of blood from his opponent. He is clearly tired of this fight. After delivering this powerful blow with the blade, he releases his opponent and he falls to the floor and groans in pain. He even begins to tremble. The goal of our main character's mission, being at his feet, asks how he managed to deceive him so many times in a row. But in response to this, our main character only smiles, telling this idiot that he too tried to do everything in order to deceive him. Meanwhile, the enemy of our main character, finding himself on the floor, cannot help but admit that he had simply excellent battle tactics. Suddenly, an unexpected notification appears behind our protagonist, which he clearly did not expect judging by his facial expression. This notice alerted us that the constellation of maneuvers that belonged to his rival was extolling his attack strategy. The second notice added that our main character is granted a small supply of holy power to provide buffs and an experience boost of 0.1%. Looking in surprise at the notification and then at the heavens, Kang Ho was very surprised by the sudden support from the constellations. In the lore of this manhwa, constellations from the heavens play a large role. Usually they only watch over the hunters, but do not support them. This is because these constellations in the sky are depleted because of these hunters, but this time the constellation supported our main character. Immediately after this, another notification appeared in front of our protagonist, only this time from his main legendary constellation. This notification from a constellation called the Dimension Stealer gave our protagonist a skill called Minor Support, a drop in the bucket. Our main character's constellation informed him that due to the support of other constellations, it was a little offended. The guy grinned because his constellation was jealous. The guy reassured his first constellation by saying that it might not bother, because his best decision was to choose it, and in return he would do everything in his power. A legendary level golden constellation called our main character a madman and told him to deal with that guy. Kang Ho began to move towards the man. The guy listened to his golden constellation and literally put a spoke in the wheel, or a knife in this guy's calf, stopping him from his pathetic escape. Turning around, the victim of our main character began to shout at him, asking if capturing someone like him would give him anything. Meanwhile, Sigma continued to move towards this loser and summoned his sword. This coward continued to try to dissuade our protagonist, asking if his death would be of any use. The guy told this scoundrel that if the world could change thanks to the capture of people like him, he would have been doing this a long time ago, which means the only way out is execution. Swinging with all his might, our main character made a powerful cut, dividing the bastard into 2 Twix sticks. Choose which side you are on. After the guy who was allowed to be executed finally gave up the ghost thanks to the legendary constellation of our main character, they got someone else's. Now in the arsenal of our main character, there was another constellation called a Chaos Fighter. With this murder, he inherited all the abilities of this constellation. After even more notifications appeared in front of our main character, he began to study them in detail to find out what he received thanks to this. Having found the right menu, our main character realizes that he has just received a skill called Blindness and Light Chaos into his arsenal. Kang Ho was pleased with the skills he had acquired, but it wasn't enough for him, so he wondered why he didn't pick up the item that the tramp used during the fight. Inspired by this idea, our main character began to slowly pull off the shabby jacket from this guy, even though undressing men was not his hobby, and there was no choice. After a couple of moments, our main character dug up a very good catch, consisting of a breastplate, those very necessary bastard boots, and some kind of glove. But according to our main character, for level 50 these items were rather dubious, but they still remained quite useful. Putting a glove with a thread that he had recently found on his hand, he realized that his dagger together with this thread would just fit perfectly. After this, the hands of our protagonist reached the breastplate, which he also picked up. Taking it, he realized that he needed to change the effect of this equipment on health. Then our main character got to a seemingly ordinary ring, which actually increased the stamina that our main character loved so much. The sweetest thing is left for last, the Amulet of the God of Evil, which, by consuming 1 unit of mana per second during awakening, reduces the time it takes to use skills. After reading the description of this item, the guy understood that this was simply the best buff for him, because he has an inexhaustible supply of mana due to his innate skill. Rereading the description of this cool item for him, he realized that now he could sell all the items of the 9th level and get a good profit from them. At this moment, the level of our main character was equal to 19. He understood that it would be nice to increase his level on the way back. Leaving this destroyed city with a confident gait, he understood that the Killer Devourer skill was not far off. The course of events accelerates a little. Kang Ho still continues to walk around this destroyed city, but surprisingly, he does not encounter a single monster. Kang Ho immediately realized that this place could serve as an ideal place for a planned ambush for the purpose of robbery. Our protagonist's critical thinking never fails him, as moments later we see a reflection from a nearby building. Kang Ho is again being watched, apparently by the same gang of raiders who continued to follow him in order to rob him. This time, after the girl with two long tails asked the boss if his time had come, the guy finally answered that this was the moment. Meanwhile, the third member of this group of losers was waiting for a sign from below in order to begin an operation called taking a bunch of loot from the loser. A couple of moments later, we watch a pumped-up representative of this gang who, with a grin, gives an order to the guy below to begin the operation. After this not handsome guy without one tooth sees a clear sign about the beginning of the operation, he prepares to release the creatures that are in his bag. The next moment, this little rat releases a whole bunch of rabbits with red eyes that we were already familiar with. After they notice the blood of our main character, as we know, they begin to transform into real killers of the 100th level. Our main character looks in surprise at the crowd of these same rabbits with red eyes that seem to have appeared out of nowhere. This time our main character is much stronger than in the last encounter with these loser rabbits because he can easily kill this crowd with one movement. Immediately after this instant killing of these noob rabbits, a notification notifies the guy that he has reached the 20th level, which he was looking forward to. After all, it was upon reaching the 20th level that our main character discovered the main skill of the assassin class, called a quick strike. Moreover, thanks to the iconic level constellation, our main character immediately after receiving this skill receives its version improved to the maximum. Another notification immediately appears, notifying us that the skill has been upgraded thanks to the constellation to the maximum level bleeding blow skill. Looking at all these pleasant bonuses that had just become available to our main character in an instant, he smiled because he had become much stronger. Meanwhile, a crowd of hunters who wanted to rob him silently watched as he dealt with those who were supposed to kill him. It was too easy for him. However, the leader tried to convince the girl that she was wrong, and thanks to this attack, our main character just relaxed his guard for the next attack. That is why this pumped-up Guts cosplay jumped onto our main character as quickly as possible, with the goal of cutting him into two parts. But the guy's spider sense was so bad that this guy was forced to just cut the air in half while Kang Ho teleported away. After performing the blow, this cheap version of Guts looked in surprise at our main character, who was already 10 meters away from him. The guy immediately began to analyze why the hell these losers attacked him. He assumed that they wanted to rob him just a little more and his head would have been blown off his shoulders. This muscular leader of the hunters also had a constellation, as the mark above his head told us the guy was simply angry that he missed. But he was not about to give up yet. He immediately used a dash to close the distance and then delivered another crushing blow. But despite the sweeping power of the huge blade, during the completion of the blow, the man opened all his weak points for Kang Ho's attack. As was to be expected, our main character did not intend to lose such a chance to carry out an attack, so this oaf received a feather in the ribs. Our main character dealt an unusual blow, so the notification informed him that in order for the bleeding blow to weaken the target's regeneration ability, he needed to strike 9 more times. After carrying out the attack, this Guts of this Manhwa smiled strongly and looked at Kang Ho and asked if he called this pathetic attack his attack. A support group for this red-haired man immediately arrived at this battle. They called him a real berserker from the anime or manga of the same name. These guys called this battle endless because if the guy continues to simply avoid blows, their boss will become stronger and stronger. This thug continued to perform sweeping blow after blow. Kang Ho, escaping these blows, realized that he was definitely strong for his class. Continuing to deliver his bloody blows, our main character admitted that this thug was even stronger than him in his killer class. Despite the fact that Kang had already dealt the second bleeding blow out of 10 to weaken him, this big guy spread his arms to the side and asked for more. However, the guy grinned because he understood that if he struck at least 4 more times, the tide of the battle would immediately change, and this gorilla did not even suspect it. The next move of our main character was an unexpected rush at high speed towards this bruiser with a large sword. However, this was not exactly a head-on attack, because while closing the distance, our main character used his skill to blind his opponent. But Kang Ho was not going to limit himself to blindness alone. Immediately after it came his second new skill called Light Chaos, which puzzled the berserker. This bruiser was completely confused by the many different skills of your main character, which is why he missed a whole bunch of bleeding blows. But our chief realized that no matter how many times he wounded his opponent, so far it was of almost no use. After a couple of moments, the the vision of our protagonist's opponent returned and he finally saw where his opponent was, thinking about a new attack. This berserker was terribly angry from the large number of skills that were interfering with him. Smiling madly, he asked the guy if he had really run out of his pathetic tricks. But after a couple of seconds, this thug fell silent because he felt an incredible attack of sharp pain that made him rethink his existence. Writhing from sudden and very enormous pain, this muscular man did not understand what was happening to him. He could not believe that right now he was losing his strength. Meanwhile, this man's support group, who are watching the progress of the battle from cover, begins to worry about their only boss. But this thug simply refused to accept this reality. He shouted that he could not lose strength because the more he was beaten, the stronger he became. But the dissatisfied cries of this thug were interrupted by the already familiar to us huge demonic hand of our protagonist, which easily grabbed him. After Kang Ho easily pulled this huge carcass, which probably weighed more than 100 kilograms, he dealt a powerful blow to this thug with his dagger. Next, Kang Ho told this guy that even though he is a berserker, he remains a person who will die in any case if he loses too much blood. After these words, this huge muscular carcass fell on the asphalt in front of our main character, who practically did not feel the difficulty. It turns out that this guy's support group, which was following the progress of the battle, was not so devoted after all. When they saw this, they began to flee. Our main character looks at the running cowards and, while eating a tasty treat, wondered where such idiots come from. But nothing can be done since the Hosanna hunters are isolated. Meanwhile, once again, the constellation that belonged to the victim of our main character passed to him. This time it was called the Blood Eater. Another notification popped up in front of our main character, which once again notified that all the skills of this constellation were being transferred to the guy's arsenal. During this day, our main character received a whole second constellation for this day. Immediately after receiving it, he turned his gaze to the heavens. The guy turned to his legendary level constellation. He asked him if he should have supported him with a successful fight. Instead of support, the legendary co-star told the guy that he was a crazy idiot. They clearly had an interesting relationship. This new constellation of our protagonist was also extremely rare. It gave our protagonist the ability to increase immunity to mental attacks. Our main character clearly liked the constellation that protected him from mental attacks. He also collected a lot of necessary items from this guy. He picked up a bracelet with resistance to magical attacks and shoes that, once worn, increased the wearer's movement speed. Continuing to look for useful items, he also discovered gloves that increased our protagonist's favorite statistic, stamina. Equipping this glove, our main character has put together just the perfect set. With the help of the last glove, he can throw weapons, and the second one can increase stamina. After our main character received 2 whole constellations and 2 whole boss skills and a bunch of cool items, he realized that it was time for him to complete his first mission. At this point, the course of events stops and we are transported to Daejeon. Finally, instead of destroyed buildings and ruins, we see a beautiful city at night. Having moved to one of the buildings, we watch as our main character delivers to the commander the very shoes of the bastard that were the target of his request. Despite the fact that the girl provided our boss with this order, she did not expect that he would find these Barbarossa shoes so easily. Immediately after this, she thanked the guy for the excellent execution of the order. Our main character listened carefully to all the remarks of this girl. Meanwhile, she continued by saying that the first order of a mercenary is a test. Half of the people fail. The guy understands that 50% of people die during the first request. The guy at that time understood that thanks to composure and prudence, the percentage of successful requests could and became much higher. After a moment, the girl puts the documents on the table and says that, as she promised, she would provide him with access to the dungeon with mid-level bosses. The documents contained all the data. The location described in the documents was Thunderstorm Pass, located at Gapyeong Station. 4 mid-level bosses and 1 boss are located in this location. After that, the girl superficially familiarized our main character with the contents of the documents. She asked him if he was satisfied with the reward. In response to this question, the guy smiled because he understood that in this dungeon, there were hidden the 5 skills he needed that he would receive after the murder. Having placed the documents back on the table, the guy with a smile on his face told the girl that he would go to this dungeon immediately tomorrow afternoon. Almost forgetting, the guy called up many items that he had obtained on the mission. He asked the girl if she would like to purchase these items. The mercenary commander was very surprised. Looking at the items that Kang Ho had placed on the table, the girl said that his catch was very good. She added that she would pay a lot for it. After they dealt with the items, the girl said that they could proceed to the next request of our main character. The guy did not want to familiarize himself with these documents in detail. Instead, he pointed to the guy's picture and asked if he was his target. The girl replied that this was a request from the Public Security Agency. The client's name is Heo Jong Tai. He is accused of theft of government property and robbery causing bodily harm. The reward for this guy was 300 million won and 1 month of VIP dungeon services below level 100, but they didn't have a single lead. They only know that he was spotted at Yeonpyeong Station. However, our main character was not at all frightened by the lack of information. He briefly replied that everything was in order, and he had a way to find the purpose of the request. The course of events after this frame is skipped, and our main character sets out to find this bastard, having sold unnecessary items and earned as much as 250 million won. The guy understood that in addition to the order, since he now had money, he needed to somehow take care of his life in order to improve his conditions. Having called a number, the guy said that he would like to buy as many as 10 batches of Salakium. He asked to deliver these fruits to Yongsan Station. The man who at that moment was on the other end of the line, without further questions, briefly accepted the order of our protagonist. After finishing the phone conversation, Kang Ho looked up and realized that he still had time before he began conquering the dungeon from which he received data as a reward for his first task. Having stopped and looked at the sign of the Hades Club, the guy decided that he could afford to have a drink and collect some information. Moving inside this club, we watch a fight between two drunks in which a drunkard with blonde hair wins. Our main character does not participate in this atrocity. Instead, he sits calmly at the bar and orders a couple of glasses without bothering anyone, while the other animals place bets. Next, our main character puts a lot of bills on the bar counter and asks to pour him a glass of Salacium. This plant is very rare, so the price is also huge. A girl with red hair named Benny is very surprised by the guy's request because no one usually orders such an exotic drink. Benny says that she didn't think anyone would ever order it because it has a unique taste. Kang Ho replies that it's just his type. The barmaid named Benny turns to her arsenal and asks the guy to wait. The guy understands that the bartender in such establishments always has useful information. Turning back, the guy also understands that despite the large amount of information that bartenders have, it is of course not always reliable. Looking around the bar, the guy notices a person who he sees in great shock. Apparently, he didn't expect to see her at all. Looking at the girl who our main character was surprised to see, we see a real waifu with short black hair who sits at the very end of the bar. The guy understands that she is a subordinate of Eclipse Executive Director Kang Dong-hyun. In other words, she is a hunting mongrel named Cha So-hee. The guy is very worried because he admits the possibility that he can be followed. Meanwhile, the girl serves a drink to Kang Ho, saying that this is the first time he has seen such a handsome man. Barmaid Benny, looking at our main character whom she called handsome, regrets that she will not see him again. The guy asks the girl why she says that. She replies that, judging by rumors, the Eclipse organization is going to take over this club. Benny continues saying that they want to capture the hunters gathered here in order to send them to work as slaves in their famous Mana Stone mines. The barmaid continued by saying that this organization is very popular for this one of the typical methods of trafficking in living people. Once again, looking at the hunting mongrel of the Eclipse organization, the guy concludes that perhaps she is here for the reason stated by Benny. The guy understands that he shouldn't stay here for long, and he should hurry up so as not to get himself into trouble. Suddenly, something unexpected happens that makes our main character, along with the bartender Benny, very surprised.